I'm Elara Vance, and for most of my life, I was the other daughter, the one who couldn't quite measure up to Serafina, the golden child of our family. At 32, I had no titles, no spotlight, and no applause. Just a quiet job in tech and years of quiet comparison. Then one night, everything changed. I walked into a corporate event where my sister ruled the room, and I walked out with every executive there knowing I was the CEO, including her. The look on her face? I'll never forget it. But the moment wasn't about revenge. It was about finally being seen for who I truly am. Before I tell you how that night unfolded, drop a comment and let me know if you've ever been underestimated by someone close to you. And if you've ever stepped out of someone's shadow, hit that like and subscribe. This story might be the reminder you didn't know you needed. Growing up as Serafina Vance's little sister often felt like living in a permanent eclipse. She was 4 years older than me. Serafina is 36 now. I'm 32. And for as long as I can remember, she was the undisputed golden child of our family. While most siblings have their own strengths and quirks, Serafina seemed to be touched by brilliance in everything she did. By third grade, she was breezing through high school-level novels. In middle school, she was both class president and captain of the debate team. High school? A whirlwind of accolades. Valedictorian, prom queen, state tennis champion, and recipient of a full scholarship to the prestigious Ivywood University. Impressive, right? Almost like something out of a magazine spread. And then there was me, Elara, the ordinary one. Not that I truly was ordinary, but standing next to Serafina's spotlight made it easy for people to overlook whatever small light I carried. My solid B+ average looked pitiful beside her flawless 4.0. My occasional article in the school paper seemed irrelevant compared to her role as editor-in-chief. Even when I discovered my love for computer programming and won a regional coding competition in 11th grade, my parents barely blinked. "That's fine, sweetie," my mother said, without even lifting her eyes from the pile of college brochures Serafina had spread across the kitchen table. "But don't you think you should focus more on your regular classes? Look at all the opportunities Serafina's gotten thanks to her grades." My parents never intentionally pitted us against each other, but they didn't have to. The comparisons flowed naturally, effortlessly, even, and neither of them seemed to notice the toll it was taking on me. My father was especially prone to it. He'd introduce us as Serafina, our Ivywood graduate, and Elara, our youngest, as if my entire identity boiled down to birth order. College only widened the gulf between us. Serafina graduated valedictorian, again, with dual degrees in economics and business administration. Within weeks, she had job offers lined up and accepted a coveted position at Apex Holdings, one of the most elite financial firms in the country. Her starting salary exceeded my parents' combined income, and to them, it was the ultimate validation. Their pride was palpable, overflowing even. And me? I became the echo that followed her applause. My college journey was far more winding than Serafina's straight shot to greatness. I started at Regional State College, majoring in business, desperately trying to walk the path she had so effortlessly paved. But it didn't take long before I realized I was miserable. After one especially grueling semester, I dropped out. My parents were stunned, heartbroken, really, as if I'd abandoned a sacred family tradition. 6 months later, I enrolled at a different school with a new focus, psychology. But that didn't stick either. By the end of the year, I switched again, this time to computer science. It took me 5.5 years to finally earn my degree. And when graduation day came, it couldn't have been more different from Serafina's grand affair. No valedictorian speech, no standing ovations. Just me, sitting quietly in the back row, clutching my cap like a lifeline. "At least you finished," my mother whispered, squeezing my hand gently, as if comforting me after some deep personal tragedy. Serafina didn't even show up. She said she had a business meeting that couldn't be moved. My early career mirrored the chaos of my academic years. I hopped from one entry-level IT job to another, never staying longer than 18 months. Meanwhile, Serafina was scaling the corporate ladder at Apex Holdings with the precision of a woman who never missed a step. Every family gathering became a subtle reminder of the widening gap between us. "So, Elara," she'd say over Thanksgiving dinner, a fork poised elegantly in midair, "still at that tech support job?" She knew full well I'd left months ago. Actually, I'm working as a junior developer now, I'd reply, forcing cheer into my voice like trying to light a damp match. Oh, right, she'd chuckle. It's just hard to keep up when you change jobs so often. And then she'd laugh, the kind of laugh that wasn't meant to wound outright, but still left a sting. My parents would laugh too, not cruelly, but with that awkward, complicit chuckle people give when they don't quite realize they're part of someone else's hurt. To them, my journey was a curious detour, a charming little quirk, not the real, vulnerable search for where I truly belonged. The turning point came when I met Arthur Sterling. He was in his early 60s then, a seasoned veteran of the tech world who'd seen empires rise and fall, watched trends come and go like tides. At the time, I was working at a modest tech consulting firm, helping him recover data from a damaged hard drive. Something about the way I approached the problem caught his attention. You don't think like everyone else, he told me, after I'd solved the issue using a workaround most wouldn't have considered. That's rare, and it matters. It was a simple remark, tossed out casually while I packed up my tools. Yet it meant more to me than all the backhanded compliments I'd ever received from my family. That single sentence held more affirmation than years of strained comparisons. Arthur and I kept in touch after that. He became a mentor of sorts, encouraging me to explore my ideas, to trust my instincts, and to honor the way my brain was wired. He saw potential in me where no one else had bothered to look. Naturally, Serafina dismissed the relationship with a sneer. A retired tech guy giving you career advice? That's cute, she said once during one of our rare phone calls. You do realize tech changes every 5 minutes, right? Not exactly like finance. Oh, by the way, I just got promoted, junior vice president. I congratulated her with genuine warmth, even as her words sliced me a little. That was our pattern. Serafina soared, and made sure the world knew it. I stumbled and tried not to let her commentary chip away at whatever resolve I had left. What Serafina and the rest of my family didn't know was that I'd been quietly building something of my own. For years, I spent late nights and weekends coding, designing prototypes for apps and systems that might never see the light of day, but filled me in a way no paycheck ever had. I showed Arthur some of those side projects, and even in my own uncertainty, he saw something. You've got something special here, Elara, he said one afternoon, his eyes lighting up as I walked him through my latest creation. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And for the first time in my life, I started to believe it, that maybe I was capable of more than simply orbiting around Serafina's success. I just needed the right moment, a window, to prove it. Not just to them, but to myself. That moment arrived on a quiet Tuesday evening. I was reheating leftover Chinese food in my tiny one-bedroom apartment when my phone rang. At first, I thought it was one of Arthur's usual check-ins, but his voice held an unfamiliar urgency. Elara, I need to talk to you about an opportunity, he said, skipping over pleasantries. You free for breakfast tomorrow? The next morning, over coffee and sunny-side-up eggs at his favorite diner, Arthur laid it out. I've been invited to consult for a startup called Ether Dynamics, he explained. They've built something promising, but they're struggling to find their market. I nodded, still unsure where this was going. Arthur consulted on projects all the time. This one didn't sound all that different. I want you to come with me, he said, sliding a folder across the table. As my partner, I nearly choked on my coffee. Me? Arthur, I'm not a consultant. I'm just a developer. His eyes narrowed in that familiar way, the way they always did when he thought I was underselling myself. You're a problem solver with vision. That's exactly what Ether needs right now. The role would require me to leave my current job, but the 3-month contract paid more than my annual salary. Still, I hesitated. The fear of failure had a way of tightening its grip just when hope tried to break through. What if I mess it up? What if I can't help them? Then you'll walk away with experience and a decent paycheck for your trouble, he said with a calm certainty. But I don't think you'll fail. And just like that, I said yes. Not because I was entirely confident, but because someone finally was. 2 weeks later, I stepped through the glass doors of Ether Dynamics for the very first time. The company occupied 3 floors of a sleek modern high-rise in the heart of downtown. Their logo, a stylized rising sun, was etched into the marble wall of the lobby, projecting optimism and innovation. But the atmosphere inside told a different story. Conversations were whispered, eyes were wary. and the empty desks scattered throughout the open floor plan hinted at recent rounds of layoffs. Arthur and I were introduced to the executive team, an all-male lineup of seasoned professionals, most of whom greeted me with thin smiles and barely concealed skepticism. The only one who seemed genuinely glad to see us was Nina Rostova, head of product development. Later, she confided in me that Ether was on the brink. "We've got brilliant technology," she said, as she walked me through their product lab. "But we're bleeding cash, and our market strategy's just not working. We've got 6 months, maybe less." During those first few weeks, I kept my head down and my ears open. I sat in on meetings, pored over financial forecasts, and familiarized myself with their product line. Gone were the late nights spent tinkering on passion projects. I now spent my evenings buried in customer feedback, competitor analysis, and market research reports until my eyes ached. What I uncovered was both thrilling and terrifying. Ether had built a revolutionary data processing system, technology that could fundamentally change how businesses managed information. But they were aiming it at the wrong market. Instead of targeting nimble mid-sized firms, they were chasing slow-moving giants with glacial buying cycles. It was a mismatch that was quietly sinking them. I worked day and night to craft a new proposal, an ambitious, sweeping plan to redirect their marketing focus, adjust pricing models, and repackage their core technology into a scalable solution that could grow with their clients. It was a gamble, no question. I was, in effect, asking them to abandon their entire current strategy. But the numbers backed me up. The night before I was set to present to the board, I called Arthur in a full-blown panic. "I can't do this," I whispered, pacing my apartment. "They're not going to listen to me. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody," Arthur said, his voice steady. "You're the person who might just save their company. Don't forget that." The board meeting was every bit as intimidating as I had feared. 8 stone-faced men stared back at me as I presented my findings and outlined my recommendations. When I finished, a heavy silence settled over the room. "This is ambitious," the chairman finally said. The kind of tone that made it clear ambitious wasn't meant as a compliment. "It's also your best shot," Arthur countered firmly. "I've been in this business 40 years, and I'm telling you, Elara's approach makes sense." What followed was hours of heated debate. Some board members were intrigued. Others dismissed my proposal outright. Eventually, a compromise emerged. I'd be allowed to lead a small task force to implement my strategy on a limited product line. If we saw measurable results in 60 days, they'd consider a full-scale shift. Those 2 months were some of the most exhausting and exhilarating of my professional life. I worked 16-hour days, side by side with Nina and a scrappy team of true believers who had nothing left to lose. We overhauled the marketing materials, retrained the sales staff, and personally reached out to dozens of new leads in our redefined target market. The results came faster than anyone expected. By week 6, we had closed more new accounts than Ether had in the previous half year. By the end of the pilot, revenue had jumped 40%, and for the first time in a long time, the company had a clear path to profitability. The board was impressed, so impressed in fact, that they approved a full rollout of my strategy and offered me a permanent role as Chief Strategy Officer. I accepted the position, my heart thudding with both pride and a flicker of fear. I knew what lay ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't following in anyone's footsteps. I was blazing my own. What happened next, I never saw coming. Just 3 months into my new role, Arthur called me into his office with a familiar, thoughtful look on his face. He told me he was stepping down as interim CEO, the position he had taken during the company's crisis. "The storm has passed," he said quietly. "Now the company needs vision, not rescue." I swallowed hard. "So, who's taking over?" I asked, already dreading the idea of answering to a new CEO who might undo everything we'd built. Arthur gave me that knowing smile of his. "No one's coming in," he said. "They're promoting from within." He placed a firm, fatherly hand on my shoulder. "They're offering it to you, Elara," I laughed, certain he was joking, but his face didn't budge. "Me? CEO? Arthur, I've been here 5 months. And in those 5 months, you turned this company around and gave it a future," he said. "The board voted unanimously. They want you to lead Ether into its next chapter." The swearing-in ceremony was quiet. No grand speeches, no press release. Just the board, Arthur, and a few key executives. When the chairman handed me a small gold pin with Ether's Rising Sun logo and said, "Sometimes the best leaders are the ones no one sees coming," I felt something shift deep inside me. Not pride exactly, something quieter. A resolve. I didn't tell my family right away. It wasn't about staging a dramatic reveal. I just needed time. Time to settle into the role, to prove to myself I deserved it, before facing the inevitable skepticism from Serafina and my parents. "You should tell them," my best friend Chloe insisted, as we clinked glasses to celebrate my promotion. "Serafina will have to acknowledge your success now." "That's exactly why I haven't told them," I replied. "I don't want this to be about her, or her recognition. I want to know I can do this job well, no matter what my family thinks." Chloe shook her head but didn't push. Instead, she lifted her drink again. "To Elara Vance, the extraordinary secret CEO." I toasted back, still half dazed that this was my life now. I keep waiting for someone to realize they've made a terrible mistake. "Classic imposter syndrome," she said with a grin. "Get over it quickly. CEOs don't have time for that." She wasn't wrong, and in the weeks that followed, I began to settle in. The executive team respected my decisions. The staff responded to my leadership. And slowly but surely, the business continued to grow. But then the news broke, setting the stage for the moment I had long anticipated and dreaded. Apex Holdings, yes, that Apex, where Serafina was now a junior vice president, had announced it was exploring acquisitions of smaller tech firms to diversify its portfolio. Ether Dynamics was on their radar. The board was intrigued. A partnership with Apex could unlock the capital we needed to expand more rapidly. I, however, was less enthusiastic. I worried about preserving our culture, our independence. Still, I agreed to explore the conversation, which is how I found myself invited to a private industry mixer, an informal event meant to break the ice between potential partners before any formal negotiations began. And yes, Serafina would be there. For the first time since I became CEO, I'd be seeing her face to face. "Are you going to tell her beforehand?" Chloe asked when I called her, slightly panicked. "No," I said after a beat. "If I tell her now, she'll think I'm trying to impress her. I'd rather just show up and do my job." "This is going to be so good," Chloe said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Promise me you'll call right after and tell me everything." Assuming I survived the night, I half joked as I hung up. I tried to calm the storm in my mind. After years of shrinking in Serafina's shadow, I was about to step into the same room as her, not as the younger sister, not as the overlooked one, but as her equal, maybe even her superior. The thought both terrified me and thrilled me. The night of the networking event arrived faster than I expected. I found myself, once again, standing in front of my closet, second-guessing my outfit for the 20th time, just like I used to in high school before a family dinner, always feeling like the plain one next to Serafina and her designer wardrobe. But tonight had to be different. I finally chose a charcoal-tailored suit with subtle pinstripes and a deep sapphire silk blouse in Ether's signature color. Professional without being flashy, authoritative without trying too hard. I kept my makeup minimal, twisted my hair into a neat low bun, and pinned the small gold Ether insignia to my lapel. When I glanced at my reflection, I hardly recognized the woman staring back. The timid younger sister had vanished. In her place stood someone capable, someone in command. "You've earned this," I whispered to the mirror, repeating the mantra Arthur had once offered for moments when my confidence wavered. The event was held at the Zenith Grand Ballroom, one of the city's most prestigious venues for exclusive corporate gatherings. As my driver pulled up to the entrance, I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and stepped into the crisp evening air. Inside, the ballroom had been transformed into a sleek, high-end lounge. Clusters of leather chairs formed intimate conversation pockets, while a central bar and gourmet buffet encouraged mingling. I recognized a few faces from past industry events, including several of my own executives who had arrived early. I chose to remain on the sidelines at first, watching quietly with a glass of sparkling water in hand. The Apex delegation was easy to spot. They moved in a tight formation, radiating the kind of self-assured energy that comes from being used to holding the most power in any room. "Have you seen Ether's new CEO?" I overheard one man ask. "I heard they just appointed someone, but it's been unusually hush-hush. Probably some old tech vet they brought in to make the company look more viable," the other replied with a dismissive wave. "Startups always pull that stunt before a sale." I nearly laughed. How wrong they were. But before I could move on, a voice cut through the ambient chatter like a blade through silk. "Jake, Elizabeth, so good to see you both, Serafina." She looked just as I remembered, maybe even more polished. Her sleek blonde bob highlighted her sculpted cheekbones, and her navy dress exuded that expensive confidence she always wore like a second skin. She moved through the room with ease, shaking hands and flashing that perfect smile on cue. I watched her for a few minutes, putting off the inevitable reunion. Serafina thrived in these spaces. I used to count the minutes until I could escape them. Another difference our parents loved to point out. Eventually, I realized I couldn't avoid her forever. I set my glass down and approached. She spotted me when I was about 10 feet away. Her perfect smile flickered, just for a second, before it snapped back into place. "Elara," she exclaimed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "What a surprise. I had no idea you'd be here. The emphasis on you said it all. What on earth was I doing at an executive-only industry event?" "Serafina," I said evenly, leaning in for the obligatory air kiss. "It's been a while." "Far too long," she replied with a false warmth. "Let me introduce you. This is Dominic Thorne, my boss and senior VP at Apex Holdings. Dominic, this is my little sister, Elara." Dominic, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, extended his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Elara. Are you in finance like your sister?" Before I could speak, Serafina jumped in. "Oh no, Elara's in tech support. Still, right? Or have you changed jobs again?" The condescension was subtle, but unmistakable. I saw Dominic's interest dim slightly, but to his credit, he remained polite. "I'm still in tech," I said simply, choosing not to correct her, at least not yet. "How's Apex? I hear you're looking into expanding into tech markets." Dominic raised an eyebrow, intrigued that someone in tech support would know that. "Indeed we are. The future is digital." "Smart move," I nodded. "Although tech acquisitions can be tricky to integrate successfully. That's why we do thorough vetting," Serafina interjected, clearly irritated that I was having a real business conversation with her boss. Speaking of which, Dominic, the Westbrook team wanted to follow up on yesterday's discussion. Dominic seemed reluctant to leave. "Actually, I find this quite interesting. Elara, what's your take on merging legacy finance systems with modern tech infrastructure?" As I began to answer, drawing on real-world experience from leading Ether through its restructuring, I noticed Serafina growing visibly agitated. Her eyes darted around the room like she was searching for an escape. She kept interjecting with pointed remarks meant to recenter the spotlight on herself. "That's a sharp insight," Dominic said when I finished, his tone thoughtful. "You clearly understand both industries." "Elara's always been a quick study," Serafina added with a tight smile. "But theory is one thing. Actually managing complex transitions is another. At Apex, we've successfully integrated 3 acquisitions this year alone." "Impressive," I said calmly, refusing to bite. "Every acquisition has its unique challenges." Just then, another Apex executive joined the group, giving me the perfect excuse to step away. As I walked off, I could feel Serafina's gaze burning into my back. Our brief encounter hadn't gone according to her script, and she knew it. Over the next hour, I mingled with various guests, including several of my own team members, who respectfully addressed me as Ms. Vance, per our earlier agreement to keep my CEO title under wraps. I was deep in a fascinating conversation with a CTO about data privacy when I noticed Serafina watching me from across the room, her expression unreadable, but calculating. During a short break in the event, she approached me directly. "Just us now," she said, her tone clipped. "I'm confused. Why are you here, Elara? This is a closed event for executives and decision-makers." Her message was clear. "You don't belong." "I was invited," I replied coolly. "By whom?" she pressed. "Does it matter?" Her smile tightened. "I'm just concerned. These events have a certain professional standard. If you're here as someone's guest or assistant, it might reflect poorly." The faux concern was almost laughable. Thanks for worrying, but I assure you, I have every right to be here. If you say so, she said, clearly unconvinced. Just try not to embarrass yourself. These people are the top of the field. With that parting jab, she turned on her heel and rejoined her colleagues, leaving me seething, but composed. This, I reminded myself, was exactly why I hadn't told my family about the promotion. Serafina's inability to see me as anything beyond the screw-up little sister. And yet, as the evening wore on, something surprising happened. I found myself enjoying the conversations. The executives I spoke with had no preconceptions about me. They listened when I talked. They considered my ideas. It was refreshing. No shadow of Serafina to outshine me. No family history to overcome. I was so engrossed in a discussion about emerging markets that I nearly missed the shift in the room's energy. Glancing up, I saw a small crowd had gathered around Serafina, who was speaking animatedly, hands gesturing with flair. Something in her posture raised my guard. Quietly, I excused myself and moved closer, staying just on the edge. Her voice rang out, loud and clear. Brilliant with small technical fixes, but completely lost when it comes to the bigger picture. Our parents have been worried about her for years. My stomach dropped. She was talking about me. You should have seen her in college, she went on, clearly holding court now. Changed majors 3 times, took nearly 6 years to graduate. Meanwhile, I was already a junior analyst at Apex. Laughter rippled through the group, though I noticed a few uncomfortable glances. But Serafina, encouraged by the attention, raised her voice. She's always been like that, job hopping, never quite finding her place. Tech support 1 month, junior dev the next. She even air-quoted developer like it was a joke. Eventually, our parents just stopped asking about her career. It was too depressing. I stood frozen, the sting of humiliation far too familiar. This was her specialty, turning my past into punchlines to highlight her own success. She had done it at family gatherings, at the rare social events we both attended, and now she was doing it in front of industry peers, people who could very well become future partners of my company. I noticed Dominic lingering at the edge of the group, his expression growing increasingly uneasy as Serafina continued her tirade. Our eyes met across the room, and though he didn't step in, he gave me a look, part apology, part embarrassment, that said more than words could. The funny thing is, Serafina was saying, she's actually here tonight. I have no idea how she got invited, but that's classic Elara, always trying to network her way into opportunities instead of earning them the hard way like the rest of us. The group's attention shifted toward me. I saw recognition bloom across a few faces. Some looked uncomfortable, as if realizing they'd been caught listening to something they shouldn't. Others just looked curious, interested to get a glimpse of the supposedly underwhelming younger sister. I had a choice: walk away and keep what little dignity I had left, or stand my ground and confront it head-on. The old Elara would have slipped out, quietly cried in the back of a taxi. But that version of me was long gone. With a steady breath, I straightened my blazer, touched the ether pin on my lapel for reassurance, and walked toward the group. "Serafina," I said as I approached, my voice calm despite the adrenaline pumping through me. "I see you're keeping everyone entertained with family stories." Her smile faltered just a beat before snapping back, brighter than ever. "Elara, I was just telling them about your unconventional career path." "I heard," I said evenly, "though I think you may have left out a few recent developments." "Oh," she laughed lightly. "Another job switch? Hard to keep up." She earned a few polite chuckles. Encouraged, she pressed on. "So, what is it you're doing now? Still fixing computers when they break down?" "Something like that," I replied vaguely, curious just how far she'd go if I didn't stop her. I didn't have to wait long. "Let me guess," she said, her voice sharper now. "You're here tonight hoping to make some connections. Maybe find the next job when this one inevitably falls through. That's always been your style, hasn't it? Drifting from one thing to the next, never quite getting it right." The room had grown noticeably quieter. More people were tuning into our exchange. I said nothing, letting her dig the hole deeper. "Must be exhausting," she went on. "Constantly reinventing yourself. Always the irrelevant little sister, always trying to catch up." A few folks now openly exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. But Serafina, fueled by what she believed was her superior status, didn't notice or didn't care. "I mean really, Elara," she said. her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush still loud enough for all to hear. You walk into a room like this, surrounded by actual executives, actual decision-makers, pretending like you belong. She swept a hand around dramatically. These people run companies, shape industries. What could you possibly bring to a conversation like this? Dominic cleared his throat pointedly, trying to signal her to stop, but she was too wrapped up in her own performance. Look around, she continued. Everyone here earned their place through hard work and talent. They're not lost souls hoping to network their way into relevance. Silence, the kind that hums in the air and settles heavy on everyone's shoulders. I felt dozens of eyes land on me, waiting. And for a split second, 1,000 old humiliations flooded back. Serafina belittling my science project in front of a teacher, correcting my stories mid-sentence at Thanksgiving, telling my college friends why I changed majors, again. But this time was different. I wasn't that girl anymore. I didn't need Serafina's approval, or anyone's for that matter. I was about to speak when Dominic stepped forward, face a mix of disapproval and reluctant authority. He placed a hand gently but firmly on Serafina's shoulder, and for once, she actually stopped talking. Serafina, he said, quiet but clear, that's enough. She turned to him, flashing her winning smile, clearly expecting his support. I was just giving everyone some family background, she said lightly. Dominic's next words shifted the entire room. Serafina, he repeated, louder this time. That's our CEO you're talking about. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Serafina's expression cracked, her smile suspended midair, eyes wide as the meaning sank in. She turned back to me, blinking in disbelief. Wait, what? She whispered. Elara Vance, Dominic announced, addressing the small crowd now watching closely, is the CEO of Ether Dynamics, the very company Apex Holdings has expressed strong interest in partnering with. A ripple spread through the room, low murmurs, raised eyebrows, shifting postures as the realization took hold. On Serafina's face, emotions flickered in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, embarrassment, and finally, dread. No, that can't be, she stammered, her composure fraying fast. Elara is... She trailed off, unable to reconcile the woman standing in front of her with the narrative she'd clung to for years. I stepped forward, calm and collected, the anger now replaced with something quieter, something firmer. This moment wasn't about shaming her. It was about standing in my truth, separate from hers. I was appointed CEO of Ether Dynamics 6 months ago, I said clearly, addressing not just her, but everyone. Before that, I served as Chief Strategy Officer and led a full-scale restructuring that increased revenue by 40% and positioned us for sustainable growth. Serafina had gone pale. Her usual sparkle had faded. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. Dominic, to his credit, stepped in to ease the tension. Ms. Vance has played a pivotal role in turning Ether into exactly the kind of agile, innovative firm Apex is eager to collaborate with, he said, giving Serafina a sidelong glance that said everything without saying it. I didn't know, she finally said, her voice small. Then, with a visible effort, she attempted damage control. Of course, I was just joking. You know how sisters tease each other. I've always been Elara's biggest fan. But the damage was done. Several people exchanged telling looks, and I could practically see Serafina's internal spin machine clanking into motion. Instead of engaging, I redirected the conversation toward why we were all there. Stepping fully into the circle, I addressed the executives with new ease. Since we're all gathered here, I said, I'd love to take a few minutes to share Ether's vision for the future of data management in financial services. Our proprietary processing system has the potential to revolutionize how firms like Apex handle client data. As I outlined our approach, clearly, confidently, I watched the tone of the room shift. They were no longer seeing me as Serafina's sister or some footnote in her shadow. They were listening to a CEO with a clear, innovative strategy. Dominic nodded thoughtfully as I spoke, chiming in with smart questions that let me highlight Ether's strengths. Serafina stayed silent, her expression now a mix of stunned and strained. When I wrapped up, a handful of executives approached with business cards and follow-up requests. Dominic pulled me aside, his tone genuinely impressed. I'd like to explore this more deeply, he said. I think there's real synergy here. And just like that, the story shifted. For them, and finally, for me. I'm genuinely impressed, Dominic said softly. Not just with your company, but with how you handled that difficult moment. A lesser leader might have taken a very different path. Professional grace matters, I replied, glancing briefly toward Serafina, who was now standing alone at the bar, nursing what looked like a stiff drink. Especially when navigating potential business relationships. Dominic nodded, catching my meaning. Regardless, her behavior doesn't reflect Apex's standards. I'll address it privately. I thanked him for his candor. We exchanged contact information and agreed that my team would follow up soon to schedule a formal conversation. As he walked away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I was being evaluated on my own merit. Not as a comparison, not as a shadow, not as Serafina's sister, but as me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and meaningful conversations. Executives who once overlooked me now sought me out. Business cards piled in my pocket. And with each new dialogue, fresh opportunities for ether began to unfold. Serafina made one attempt to approach me. Her expression was a forced blend of sibling warmth and tentative apology. Elara, can we talk? Just for a moment. Privately. I think we've both said enough for one evening, I replied, firm, not unkind. We can talk about family matters another time. Tonight, I'm here as the CEO of Ether. She recoiled slightly at the rejection, but nodded, perhaps realizing she had crossed a line that couldn't be easily uncrossed. Of course, another time. As the event wound down, I found myself chatting with Nina Rostova, our head of product development, who had quietly witnessed the entire showdown. That was something, she whispered, as we gathered our things to leave. Are you okay? I paused, considering the question before answering. Actually, I'm more than okay, I said honestly. I spent years trying to crawl out of Serafina's shadow. Tonight, I finally stood in my own light. Nina smiled. And it's a pretty dazzling light, boss. As we walked toward the exit, I caught Serafina watching me from across the room. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and for the first time in our lives, I saw something unfamiliar in her expression, uncertainty, tinged with what might have been respect. I gave her a slight nod before turning away, knowing that whatever came next between us, the dynamic had forever shifted. On the ride home, I finally let myself process the emotional roller coaster of the night. There was no triumph in her humiliation. That had never been what I wanted. But there was a quiet, undeniable satisfaction in being seen and valued for my accomplishments, on my terms. As promised, I called Chloe the moment I walked through the door, heels in hand, collapsing onto my sofa with a mix of exhaustion and adrenaline still humming in my veins. You are not going to believe what just happened, I began. Try me, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice before I even spoke another word. The morning after the industry event, I woke up to a flood of notifications on my phone. Word had spread quickly through professional circles. Rumors of a public confrontation between Serafina and me were circulating with varying degrees of accuracy. My PR director had already sent 3 increasingly urgent messages, asking for guidance on how to respond. I sent back a single line. Business as usual, no comment on personal matters. The last thing I wanted was to fuel speculation or give the impression that I defined myself in opposition to my sister. The success of Ether and of my leadership would speak for itself, without any need for family drama to shape the narrative. As I was getting ready for work, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Serafina's name on the screen. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready for this conversation. Hello, Serafina, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Elara? Her tone was different, softer, almost unsure. I think we need to talk about last night. I agree, I said, easing down onto the edge of my bed. That wasn't how I wanted you to find out. There was a pause, then came her question, heavy with disappointment. Why didn't you tell me, or Mom and Dad? 6 months as CEO, and you didn't think your family deserved to know? Her voice held a familiar edge of accusation, but underneath it, I heard something rare. Hurt. For the first time, I considered how my silence might have looked from her perspective. I needed time, I said. Time to grow into the role, to prove to myself I was ready, and honestly, Serafina, Would you have believed me if I had told you? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I don't know, she finally admitted. It's just not what I expected from you. And that's part of the problem, I said gently. You've had a fixed idea of who I am for so long. We both have. I heard her sigh slowly. Dominic called me into his office first thing this morning. He's not happy with how I represented Apex last night. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. No matter what had passed between us, I never wanted to jeopardize her career. Don't, she said quickly, letting out a humorless laugh. I earned that. He said I showed poor judgment and unprofessional behavior. He's pulling me off the Ether acquisition team. That caught me off guard. Serafina, I could call him, explain that it was a personal issue. No, she cut me off. He's right. I let personal feelings bleed into a professional setting. That's exactly what we're trained not to do. She paused. Besides, it would be a conflict of interest now, given our relationship. The word relationship hung between us. For years, that relationship had been defined by comparison and quiet competition. Could it now become something different? Mom and Dad called, she continued. Someone they know was at the event and told them everything. They want us both to come to dinner this weekend. Talk it out. I winced, imagining the awkwardness of that conversation. Are you going? I think we should, she said, surprising me. They deserve to hear about your success from you, not secondhand. I agreed, and we made plans to meet at our parents' house on Sunday. As we were about to hang up, she added, For what it's worth, Elara, what you've accomplished is impressive. I shouldn't have needed Dominic to tell me that. It wasn't exactly an apology, but from Serafina, it meant something. Thank you, I said quietly. That means a lot. We ended the call, and I was left sitting there with a mix of emotions. The conversation had gone better than I'd expected, but years of tangled history weren't going to be unraveled overnight. Still, it was a start. At the office, the energy was electric. News of the potential partnership with Apex had stirred real excitement. I passed Nina in the hallway on my way in. We've had 2 financial institutions reach out this morning, interested in our tech, she said, practically glowing. Your talk last night made a real impression. Good, I smiled. Let's schedule meetings with both. And Nina, thank you. For last night, for having my back. She gave my hand a quick squeeze. That's what teams do. We've got yours. Later that morning, an email arrived from Dominic Thorne requesting a private meeting to discuss a potential collaboration between our companies. His message made no mention of Serafina or the previous evening's events. It was all business, entirely professional. I appreciated his discretion. As I was replying, Arthur called. I hear you had a rather eventful evening, he said dryly. Word travels fast, I sighed. It wasn't exactly how I planned to reveal my role to my sister. Sometimes, Arthur said with a wry chuckle, the universe runs on its own timetable. Are you all right? I am, I replied, surprised to realize I meant it. Actually, I feel relieved. Like I finally stepped out from under that shadow I've been carrying for years. Good, Arthur said warmly, because now comes the hard part. What's that? Deciding if a partnership with Apex is really the right move for Ether, regardless of the personal complications, he said. And he was right, of course. Last night's drama had clouded the purpose of the event. Now I had to evaluate the opportunity based solely on its merit. I've scheduled a leadership meeting for tomorrow, I told him. We'll review everything objectively before moving forward. That's my girl, Arthur said with pride. Always the strategist. After we hung up, I spent the afternoon poring over financials and growth projections. By evening, I had a clearer picture of what Ether needed from any potential partnership, and what we were in a position to offer in return. Sunday came faster than I'd hoped. I found myself parked outside my parents' suburban home, trying to summon the courage to walk in. Serafina's sleek black Mercedes was already in the driveway. Family dinner was every bit as awkward as I had feared. My mother busied herself with the food, fluttering around the table in a nervous haze, while my father toggled between strained silence and forced cheerfulness. Serafina sat unusually quiet, offering polite remarks about the meal, but steering clear of any meaningful conversation. It wasn't until dessert that my father finally cleared his throat and spoke. So he began, voice gravelly. I hear congratulations are in order, for you, Elara. Thank you, Dad, I replied, meeting his gaze. I was appointed CEO of Ether Dynamics 6 months ago. 6 months? My mother gasped. And you didn't tell us? I wanted to prove myself first, I explained, echoing what I'd already told Serafina. The company was going through a major transformation. I needed space to focus and lead without distractions. Still, my mother persisted. We're your family. We should have been the first to know. To my surprise, Serafina stepped in on my behalf. I think I understand why Elara kept it to herself, she said, setting her fork down gently. There's a certain pattern in our family. My parents looked puzzled. What do you mean? My father asked. Serafina glanced at me, as if checking for permission. We've always had our roles. I was the achiever, the one who checked every box, and Elara was the perpetual work in progress, I finished for her. That's not fair, my mother objected, though her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it, though? I asked gently. When I dropped out of college, Dad said I should try to be more like Serafina. When I changed careers for the 3rd time, Mom asked if I'd ever find my place, like Serafina had. There was a long pause. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, a flicker of realization crossing their faces. We never meant to compare you, my father said eventually. We just wanted you to succeed. And in your minds, success looked like Serafina's path, I replied. But that wasn't my path. It took me longer to find it, but I did, and I did it my way. Serafina had been silent through most of the exchange, watching. Now she spoke up. I owe you an apology, Elara. Several, actually. I wasn't fair to you. I competed in ways that weren't healthy for either of us. The admission cost her something, and I respected her for saying it, especially in front of our parents. I wasn't blameless either, I admitted. I resented your success instead of defining my own. My mother wiped at her eyes. I didn't know you both felt this way. We never meant to create competition between you. It wasn't intentional, I assured her. But it was real, and now we have a chance to change it. What followed was perhaps the most honest conversation our family had ever shared. My parents asked thoughtful questions about my role at Ether, listening carefully as I outlined my leadership philosophy and the company's evolving direction. Serafina opened up too, admitting the pressure she'd felt to maintain her image at Apex, and how that pressure fed into her competitive behavior. By the time we left that evening, something had shifted among us. No, it wasn't perfect. Years of old habits don't unravel overnight. But it was a start. Outside in the driveway, Serafina stopped me just before I reached my car. I meant what I said, she told me. I'm sorry for how I treated you, especially at the networking event. I know, I said softly, and I accept your apology. She hesitated, then asked, will this affect your decision about the partnership with Apex? I appreciated her candor. No, that decision will be made based on what's best for Ether. Nothing else. She nodded, visibly relieved. Fair enough. Honestly, I think there's real potential for both companies to benefit, regardless of our history. I agree, I said. That's why I've scheduled a meeting with Dominic next week to go over the terms. Her eyebrows lifted. You did? Business is business, I said with a small smile. And clearly, I'm getting pretty good at it. For the first time in what felt like our entire adult lives, Serafina looked at me with something I hadn't seen before. Genuine respect. Yeah, she said simply. You really are. The following week brought a surprising development. Dominic called me personally to discuss a change in direction for the proposed partnership. I've been thinking about our conversation at the event, he said. Your approach to data management could revolutionize how we operate. Instead of a buyout, I'd like to propose a strategic alliance. Ether stays independent, but we integrate your system into our core platforms. It was exactly the kind of partnership I had been hoping for, one that would give Ether the resources and reach of Apex while preserving our autonomy and culture. I'm definitely interested, I told him. Have your team send over the details, and we'll set up a formal meeting. Great, Dominic said. Then, almost casually, he added, I've also restructured the leadership in our tech division. We need someone who understands both finance and technology to lead the integration from our side. I knew immediately what he was hinting at. Serafina would be excellent in that role. You really think so? He asked, sounding genuinely surprised after everything that had happened. Serafina is sharp, meticulous, and she knows Apex inside and out, I said. Personal history aside, she'd be an asset to the project. There was a pause before Dominic responded. That's incredibly generous of you. It's not generosity, I corrected him. It's good business. After we hung up, I called Chloe to give her the update. So let me get this straight, she said once I finished. Your sister publicly humiliated you, and now you're entering a deal with her company, and you just recommended her for a position that would have you working together? Life's complicated, I replied with a laugh. No kidding, Chloe said. Just promise me one thing. What's that? When they make a movie about your life, make sure they cast someone good to play me. I was still laughing when my assistant popped in to let me know Arthur had arrived for our weekly strategy session. Watching him walk into my office, I was struck by how much had changed since that first meeting in the diner. Back when he offered me an advisory role at Ether and believed in me before I believed in myself. You're looking well, he said as he took the seat across from my desk. This past week seems to have suited you. I feel different, I admitted. More whole somehow. Arthur nodded thoughtfully. You know, when I first met you, I saw someone with extraordinary potential, but bound by how others perceived you. More importantly, by how you perceived yourself. And now, I asked. I see a leader now, Arthur said plainly, yet with unmistakable warmth. Someone who makes decisions not because they're easy or expected, but because they're right. His words settled over me like a soft blanket on a cold morning, unexpectedly comforting. I couldn't have done it without your guidance, I replied sincerely. Nonsense, he waved off. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it and built something remarkable with your own hands. We spent the next hour immersed in discussion, projecting the future of Ether, exploring the new partnership with Apex, and refining my vision for what came next. When Arthur finally rose to leave, he paused at the door. Oh, by the way, he said, as if it were a passing thought. Dominic Thorne called me yesterday. Seems you recommended your sister for the integration team. I nodded, wondering what he thought. Arthur smiled, not with approval, but something deeper. That's the difference between a boss and a leader, Elara. A boss holds a grudge. A leader sees potential, even in complicated places. After he left, I sat quietly at my desk, letting the weight of everything wash over me. From the outside, it might have looked like a classic redemption arc. The underestimated younger sister finally having her moment. But it wasn't about that. It was never about revenge or proving anything to Serafina or even my parents. It was about finding my own way, in my own time, and realizing that success isn't a finish line. It's a path of becoming, of constantly evolving and learning who you truly are. Serafina and I would never have an easy relationship. Too much history stood between us for that. But maybe we could forge something new, something built on mutual respect rather than lifelong rivalry. It wouldn't be simple, but then again, the things most worth doing rarely are. 6 months passed in a whirlwind. The strategic alliance between Ether Dynamics and Apex Holdings was formally announced to enthusiastic response. Our stock prices surged, investors smiled, and the industry took notice. Under my leadership, Ether flourished. We grew our team, expanded into new markets, and pushed the boundaries of what our tech could do. As for Serafina and me, our working relationship settled into something stable. Our weekly integration meetings, once stiff and sterile, slowly became more relaxed. We weren't best friends. Too many scars still lingered. But we learned how to function as colleagues who respected each other's strengths. One moment stands out like a beacon from that period. During a joint board presentation, Serafina was outlining a complex integration protocol when a board member interrupted with a dismissive question, clearly underestimating the sophistication of her plan. Before I could step in, Serafina met his gaze and responded, firm, composed, razor-sharp. With all due respect, sir, that approach would compromise the system architecture that makes Ether's technology valuable, she said. Then, after the slightest pause, she added, as my sister, as CEO Vance, has emphasized, maintaining data integrity throughout the integration is non-negotiable. To anyone else, that correction might have seemed trivial, but to me, it signified a profound shift. For the first time, Serafina wasn't speaking to me as her younger sister, but referring to me as a leader in my own right. And it meant more than I could ever say aloud. After the meeting, I caught up to her in the hallway. Thanks for backing me up in there, I said. She shrugged, but there was pride in her expression. It was the right call. Your system design is impressive, Elara. I've learned a lot just digging into it the past few months. Coming from her, that simple recognition meant more than all the praise I'd gotten from any investor or boardroom. As our professional rapport deepened, I found myself facing an unexpected decision. Ether's rapid expansion demanded a new executive role, Chief Operating Officer, someone to streamline operations while I focused on big-picture innovation. Nina Rostova, my product head and longtime ally, was an obvious contender. She knew Ether's culture like the back of her hand. But another name kept circling back to me, Serafina. At first, the idea felt absurd. Managing an integration project was one thing. Offering her a seat at the executive table, that was something else entirely. And yet, the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Her operational acumen, her discipline, her ability to manage complex teams, those were exactly what we needed now. I brought it up with Arthur during one of our mentorship sessions. Are you considering her because she's the best person for the job? Or because you're trying to prove something, he asked, cutting right to the heart of it. It was a fair question. I thought about it long after he left, and eventually the answer became clear. It's not about whether she's qualified, I told him later. She is. The real question is whether we can work together effectively, given our past. And what do you think, he asked. I think we've both grown, I said. The last 6 months have shown that. But in the end, the choice is hers. I invited Serafina to lunch the following week at a quiet, neutral restaurant halfway between our offices. We discussed the integration updates, and then I took a breath and slid an envelope across the table. I'd like you to consider joining Ether as our Chief Operating Officer, I said. Her surprise was palpable. You're offering me a job? Reporting to you? Yes, I nodded. You'd have considerable autonomy, of course, but ultimately, you'd report to me as CEO. She stared at the envelope. Why? She asked softly. After everything between us, why me? Because you're the best fit for this stage of our company's journey, I said, voice steady. And because I believe we've proven we can work toward shared goals without being held hostage by old rivalries. There was a long pause. What about Apex? That's where I built my entire career. I already spoke with Dominic, I admitted. He doesn't want to lose you, but he understands the opportunity. He's even offered you a board seat if you choose to transition. Serafina finally picked up the envelope, scanning the offer. This is generous. It's market rate for someone with your experience and responsibility, I replied, honest and direct. I'll need time to think about it, she said, folding the offer neatly. Take all the time you need. We ended lunch on lighter topics, but I could tell her mind was already weighing the possibilities. 3 days later, she called to accept the offer. Her transition into Ether wasn't seamless. Some employees were skeptical. Whispers of nepotism circulated. Others quietly questioned whether her appointment was about skill or sibling ties. But Serafina faced those doubts with surprising humility. She worked harder than ever, letting her actions speak louder than her name. As for me, I was clear with the entire organization. Her hiring was about merit, not blood. We established firm boundaries, transparent protocols, and leadership norms that ensured our relationship, however complex, wouldn't cloud our responsibilities. Slowly but surely, the tension began to fade. As Serafina settled into her role, her operational expertise began yielding real, measurable results. Our systems became more streamlined, our workflows more scalable. The team members who had once eyed her with cautious skepticism started to recognize her precision, her dedication, and perhaps most tellingly, her willingness to do the hard work without fanfare. Our parents, naturally, were thrilled by what they perceived as the final chapter in a long family saga. To them, this was a sign that all past wounds had healed, harmony restored. But real life is rarely that neat. The truth was far more layered. Serafina and I were rebuilding, not revisiting, our relationship, this time on a foundation of professional respect. Yet the echoes of childhood rivalry lingered, and those scars don't fade overnight. The true breakthrough in our personal dynamic came quietly, late one evening at the office. We were both knee-deep in quarterly forecasts. The building around us was still and dark, long since emptied. I walked into Serafina's office with 2 cups of coffee and found her surrounded by spreadsheets. her posture uncharacteristically slumped. Exhaustion etched across her face. "I don't know how you do this," she said, accepting the coffee with a grateful smile. "Running an entire company, I mean. The weight of it, it's overwhelming." It was the first time I'd ever heard Serafina admit to struggling. That moment of vulnerability cracked something open between us. I was terrified at first, I confessed, settling across from her. I used to wake up at 3 a.m., convinced I was going to bankrupt the company. She looked genuinely surprised. "You always seemed so confident." "That was mostly performance," I admitted with a wry smile. "Fake it till you make it, right?" "I've been faking it my entire life," Serafina said softly, eyes fixed on her coffee. "People always assumed I had it all figured out, that success just came naturally to me. No one ever saw the pressure, the fear of failing, the fear of not measuring up." "I saw it," I told her gently, "but I misunderstood it. I thought you were flawless. It never occurred to me that you might be fighting your own battles." Her eyes met mine, and in that brief look, years of misjudgment dissolved. "We never really understood each other, did we?" "Not as adults," I said. "But maybe it's not too late to start." That conversation marked a quiet turning point. We began meeting for dinner now and then. No work agenda, just two sisters trying to discover who they were beyond the labels of childhood. We found shared interests we never knew we had and laughed, really laughed, at childhood memories that, from an adult lens, looked completely different. Our parents noticed the shift at family gatherings. They'd remark how wonderful it was to see us getting along at last. What they didn't see was that we weren't just smoothing over old tensions. We were building something entirely new, something that hadn't existed before. At Ether, my own journey of being underestimated shaped the company's cultural evolution. We launched mentorship programs that paired senior executives with rising stars from a variety of backgrounds. Our hiring practices were revamped to value unconventional career paths, not just pedigrees. I began to speak more openly about how innovation often comes from unexpected places and unexpected people. These weren't just personal convictions, they made good business sense. Our team became more creative, more resilient, and more collaborative when we opened the door to diverse perspectives and fresh approaches. It turned out the greatest asset a company could have wasn't just brilliant minds, it was the willingness to see brilliance where others might not look. A year after that fateful turning point, Arthur announced his retirement from consulting. We hosted a celebration at Ether's headquarters, nothing too extravagant, but full of warmth. I was given the honor of addressing the crowd, a moment that felt both ceremonial and deeply personal. "Arthur saw something in me when no one else did," I said to the room of colleagues and friends. "He taught me that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and staying humble enough to learn from the people around you." Later, after the applause had faded and the last glass had been raised, Arthur and I sat together in my office, stealing a quiet moment between the festivities. He looked around the space with a smile, as if taking in not just the furniture and walls, but everything Ether had become under my leadership. "I'm proud of you, Elara," he said softly, "not just for the company's success, but for how you've handled everything else. Your sister, your family, yourself." "I had a good teacher," I said. He shook his head gently but firmly. "A teacher can open a door, but you walked through it. You built this on your own." I hesitated, knowing it might be one of the last times I'd ask, "Do you have any advice for the road ahead?" Arthur considered that carefully, the way he always did. "Remember, success is not a destination, it's a journey. And the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. So treat yourself with the same grace you've learned to show others, including Serafina." His words lingered long after the party had ended. That night, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 18 months, from mentee to CEO, from living in Serafina's shadow to standing in my own light, from resentment to understanding. Others might tell the story differently. They might zero in on the drama, the boardroom showdown, Serafina's humiliation, my triumph. But the real transformation didn't happen in those big moments. It happened quietly, in the hard conversations, in the small gestures of professional respect, in the slow, deliberate rebuilding of trust, and the discovery of unexpected common ground. I've learned that success isn't measured by titles or paychecks, or even public validation. It's measured in resilience, the ability to fall 7 times and rise 8. It's measured in growth, the courage to shed old narratives and see yourself anew. And above all, it's measured in truth, the willingness to follow your own path, even when no one else sees where it's going. Serafina and I will never have a simple relationship. The patterns of childhood shaped us too deeply for that. But we found a way forward, one built not on rivalry, but on mutual respect. Not as competitors, but as 2 women with different strengths, different journeys, and ultimately, different definitions of what it means to succeed. Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you? How did you deal with it? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life reflections. Because sometimes, the very people who doubt you are the ones who push you to prove yourself, not to them, but to you. Thanks for listening. And wherever your road may lead, I hope you always find the courage to walk it, whether or not anyone else understands the way.